My name is Amanda Carter, 34 years old, and until last month I was the Senior Aviation Safety Inspector at Aerodynamics. After 8 years of dedicated service, I was called into a meeting and told my position was redundant. What my new manager Warren failed to realize was that my personal FAA operating license was what kept our entire operation legal. The contract I signed stated that upon termination, all company-paid certifications would be invalidated. Nobody checked until it was too late. If you are joining this crazy story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my termination backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Airplanes fascinated me since I was a little girl. While other kids had posters of boy bands and movie stars, my bedroom walls were covered with blueprints of Boeing 747 and Airbus A380. My father worked as an airline mechanic, and I would spend hours in our garage watching him explain the intricate systems that kept aircraft safely in the sky. By age 12, I could recite safety regulations that most adults in the industry struggled to remember. When it came time for college, I pursued aerospace engineering with a laser focus that surprised even my professors. While classmates balanced social lives with academics, I spent extra hours in simulation labs and took additional certification courses on weekends. My singular goal was to become an expert in aircraft safety systems. The path was grueling, expensive, and lonely at times, but I never wavered. After graduating with honors, I landed an entry-level position at a regional maintenance facility. The pay was mediocre, but the experience was invaluable. I continued pursuing specialized certifications, often paying for courses myself when my employer would not. By 28, I had earned a reputation as someone who could spot potential safety issues that others missed. That reputation led me to Aerodynamics, a mid-sized aircraft maintenance company that serviced several major airlines. In the aviation industry, proper certification is everything. One missing signature or expired license can ground an entire fleet, costing millions of dollars per day. Aerodynamics had been growing rapidly, and they needed someone with my qualifications to maintain their expanding certification portfolio. Jeffrey Miles, the founder and CEO, personally interviewed me. A former pilot with a shrewd business mind, he immediately recognized what I could bring to the company. "Amanda, your certification expertise is exactly what we need," he told me during our first meeting. "We are at a critical juncture where one regulatory misstep could set us back years." What Jeffrey particularly valued was my specialized FAA operating license for composite material inspection and repair on newer generation aircraft. This specific certification was rare in the industry and allowed Aerodynamics to service the latest models from Boeing and Airbus. Without someone holding this certification on staff, the company would be limited to working on older aircraft, only significantly reducing their market share. The contract I signed included a standard clause about company-paid certifications being invalidated upon termination. This was normal in the industry to prevent competitors from poaching certified staff without investing in their training. However, in my case, the certification was especially valuable, since I was one of the few people in the country who held it, and the company had sponsored the extensive renewal fees and continued education requirements. Over the next 8 years, I rose through the ranks at Aerodynamics. My attention to detail and regulatory knowledge made me indispensable. I built a reputation as someone who never cut corners when it came to safety. Airlines trusted my sign-off, and the FAA inspectors knew that any work I supervised met the highest standards. I formed close relationships with several colleagues, particularly Rachel Stevens in parts logistics and Michael Donovan in maintenance operations. We became a tight-knit team that could troubleshoot almost any issue that arose. Rachel, with her encyclopedic knowledge of inventory, could source obscure components when other companies claimed they were unavailable. Michael had 20 years of hands-on experience and could diagnose mechanical problems that baffled younger technicians. Under Jeffrey's leadership, Aerodynamics cultivated a culture of precision, integrity, and teamwork. We were proud of our safety record and the fact that many airlines specifically requested our facility for their most complex maintenance needs. While other shops might rush jobs to increase volume, we built our reputation on thoroughness and compliance. My personal life settled into a comfortable routine. I purchased a small house 15 minutes from the facility, adopted 2 rescue dogs named Bolt and Rivet, and even started dating occasionally, though my work schedule often made relationships challenging. My salary allowed me to pay off my student loans early and start building a solid retirement fund. I envisioned a long career at Aerodynamics, perhaps eventually moving into a director-level position as Jeffrey had hinted might be possible. All of this stability and future planning came to a sudden halt the day Jeffrey called an all-hands meeting to announce he would be taking a 3-month sabbatical, his first extended vacation in 15 years. While I am away exploring New Zealand with my wife, he announced with his characteristic warm smile, the company will be in the capable hands of Warren Mitchell, who comes to us with extensive experience in aerospace operations. Management. None of us could have predicted how quickly things would change under Warren's leadership, or how his decisions would ultimately affect not just my career but the entire future of Aerodynamics. The conference room fell silent as Warren Mitchell took the podium after Jeffrey's introduction. Where our CEO had been warm and approachable, Warren stood rigid in an impeccably tailored suit, scanning the room with cold, calculating eyes. His military-style crew cut and rigid posture immediately set a different tone than Jeffrey's relaxed leadership style. "Thank you for the introduction," Jeffrey Warren said, his voice clipped and formal. "I look forward to implementing efficiency improvements during my time here. Aerodynamics has potential, but there are clear opportunities for operational streamlining." A murmur ran through the crowd. We had just closed our most profitable quarter ever, so this suggestion that we needed streamlining felt like an unwarranted criticism. Warren continued by outlining his impressive resume, which included executive positions at 3 major aerospace companies and a stint as a consultant for a prestigious management firm. Something about his credentials struck me as slightly off, though I could not immediately identify why. The timeline seemed compressed for someone to have accomplished so much, but I dismissed my suspicion as unfounded. The next morning, I received an email requesting my presence in Warren's office for a one-on-one meeting. When I arrived, he was reviewing a spreadsheet, not bothering to look up as I entered. "Sit down, Amanda," he said after letting me stand uncomfortably for nearly a minute. "I am reviewing the departmental budget allocations, and your certification division seems disproportionately funded for its size. Our certifications are what allow Aerodynamics to service next-generation aircraft," I explained. "The training and licensing fees are substantial, but they generate our highest margin contracts." Warren finally looked up, his expression skeptical. "Your salary is 20% above industry standard for your position title." "My position includes responsibility for the composite material inspection and repair certification," I countered. "Very few inspectors hold this qualification. Certifications are just paperwork." Warren dismissed with a wave of his hand. "We can train others to handle these inspections at a lower cost point." This statement revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of aviation regulations. These certifications required years of specialized training and experience, not just a short course. "The FAA requires certified inspectors with specific credentials," I explained carefully. "Our operating license for newer model aircraft is actually tied to having qualified personnel like myself on staff." Warren's eyes narrowed slightly. "I will review the regulatory requirements. That will be all for now." Over the next few days, the office dynamics shifted noticeably. Warren began monitoring everyone's activities with an unusual level of scrutiny. He installed new time-tracking software and required detailed activity reports that took hours to complete, cutting into our actual productive work time. I noticed Warren taking a particular interest in my department's budget. He requested copies of all certification expenses for the past 3 years and questioned the renewal fees for licenses that were industry standard. During department head meetings, he repeatedly returned to the topic of certification consolidation, though he never clearly explained what that meant. A week after Warren's arrival, I was surprised to find myself excluded from a client meeting with a major airline where certification requirements were on the agenda. When I inquired about the oversight, Warren curtly informed me that he would handle those discussions himself. After the meeting, Rachel pulled me aside in the break room. "Amanda, be careful," she whispered. "Warren has been asking strange questions about your position and whether your responsibilities could be distributed among other team members." "That does not make sense from a regulatory standpoint," I replied. "The FAA requires a certified inspector with my credentials to sign off on composite repairs." "I do not think he cares about the regulations," Rachel said. "He keeps talking about bottom-line impact and redundancies." Concerned, I requested another meeting with Warren to clarify the importance of my certifications. He agreed with obvious reluctance. "The composite material certification is not just a credential," I explained, bringing documentation from the FAA. It requires specialized training, 5,000 hours of supervised experience, and continuing education. The company operating license for servicing the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 is contingent on having a certified inspector available. Warren barely glanced at the documents. I understand the technical requirements. What I am looking at is whether these functions can be more efficiently allocated. The next day, Warren implemented a new reporting structure that removed me from the leadership team and placed me under Douglas Hamilton, a recent hire I had never met before. When I looked into Douglas's background, I discovered he had worked with Warren at his previous company, but had no experience with aviation safety certifications. My anxiety grew as Warren continued to distance me from important decisions and undermine my authority. Each night I returned home with a growing sense of dread about what the next day might bring. By the third week of Warren's tenure, cost-cutting measures were being implemented across all departments. Overtime was eliminated, supply orders were scrutinized line by line, and even the coffee quality in the break room was downgraded to save a few dollars per pound. These changes might have been tolerable if they made business sense, but many seemed arbitrary and disruptive to our workflow. The most concerning development came when I discovered Warren had hired his friend Douglas Hamilton as a certification consultant at a substantial daily rate. Douglas had no background in aviation safety, but was suddenly reviewing all our certification procedures and questioning established protocols that ensured compliance with FAA regulations. During a client meeting with representatives from Transcontinental Airways, Warren openly contradicted my explanation of inspection requirements for their fleet. "Amanda is being overly cautious," he interjected when I outlined the mandatory testing for composite wing components. "Douglas has identified a more streamlined approach that will reduce your aircraft downtime by 30%. The airline representatives looked confused, as they knew the regulations as well as I did. One of them, Jane Bradley, a veteran maintenance director, raised an eyebrow. "The procedure Amanda described is the FAA standard," she noted. "I would be interested to hear how you plan to reduce the inspection time while maintaining compliance." Warren fumbled through a vague explanation about innovative methods that left everyone in the room uncomfortable. After the clients left, he pulled me aside. "Do not contradict me in front of clients again," he hissed. "Your by-the-book approach is costing us opportunities." That evening, I began systematically documenting all irregularities I observed and keeping copies of important certification documents at home. Something felt increasingly wrong about Warren's management approach, and my instincts told me to protect myself. The following Monday, Warren called a staff meeting to announce a company-wide redundancy review aimed at identifying positions that could be consolidated or eliminated. The tension in the room was palpable as employees exchanged worried glances. Later that week, while reviewing maintenance logs for an upcoming FAA audit, I discovered several records had been modified to show inspections as completed when I knew they were still in progress. The initials on the sign-offs were Douglas's despite his lack of proper certification to approve such work. I immediately brought this to Warren's attention, explaining the serious legal and safety implications. These falsified records could result in severe penalties and potentially endanger aircraft, I explained. We need to correct them immediately and implement proper sign-off procedures. Warren's face flushed with anger. You are overreacting. Douglas is streamlining our documentation process. Streamlining cannot include signing off on incomplete inspections, I insisted. That violates federal regulations and our own safety protocols. Perhaps you should consider whether your rigid adherence to bureaucratic details is still a fit for the direction aerodynamics is moving, Warren replied coldly. Not everyone will survive the redundancy review. The threat was barely veiled. I tried several times to contact Jeffrey, leaving messages about urgent regulatory concerns, but received only automated vacation replies. His 3-month sabbatical had barely reached the 1-month mark. Through Rachel, I learned that Warren had been presenting my department's certification processes as his own initiatives to the board, claiming he had identified significant efficiency opportunities that would save hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. What he failed to mention was that these efficiencies would put our FAA operating license at risk. Warren began systematically isolating me from other departments, instructing staff to direct all certification questions to Douglas instead of me. My access to certain computer systems was restricted for security streamlining, making it difficult to monitor compliance across projects. In a desperate attempt to secure my position, I prepared a detailed presentation highlighting my unique qualifications and the revenue they generated for the company. Warren canceled our meeting at the last minute, claiming more pressing priorities. Through the office grapevine, I heard Warren had been spreading rumors about my performance, suggesting I was resistant to change and unnecessarily cautious in my approach to regulations. Longtime colleagues began avoiding me in the hallways, fearful of associating with someone who appeared to be on the chopping block. The stress began affecting my health. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and found myself jumping at every email notification, fearing it might be a termination notice. My dogs Bolt and Rivet sensed my anxiety and became clingy and unsettled. The day before everything came to a head, I noticed 2 warning signs that should have prepared me for what was coming. First, my company email stopped receiving messages without explanation. Second, Warren and Douglas spent an unusual amount of time in closed-door meetings with Beth from Human Resources, a normally friendly woman who suddenly could not meet my eyes in the hallway. I went home that evening with a sense of impending doom, but even in my worst predictions, I could not have anticipated how dramatically events would unfold the next day. The morning of my termination felt different from the moment I walked through the front doors of Aerodynamics. The receptionist Linda, who normally greeted me with a warm smile, suddenly became intensely focused on her computer screen. As I passed the break room, conversations abruptly halted. Michael, my friend from maintenance operations, quickly looked away when our eyes met in the hallway. At precisely 9:15 a.m., I received a terse email from Beth in Human Resources. Please report to Conference Room B immediately. No explanation, no agenda. When I entered the small conference room, Warren sat at the head of the table with Beth positioned to his right, a folder of documents before her. The blinds were drawn, giving the room an oppressive atmosphere. Amanda, please have a seat, Warren said without preamble. His tone was businesslike, devoid of any personal connection despite our weeks of working together. As you know, we have been conducting a company-wide review of organizational efficiency, he continued once I was seated. After careful consideration, we have determined that your position has become redundant within our new operational structure. Though I had suspected this might be coming, the actual words still hit me like a physical blow. 8 years of dedicated service dismissed as redundant in a single sentence. Douglas will be absorbing your certification oversight responsibilities as part of our departmental consolidation. Warren explained, his mouth forming what almost resembled a satisfied smile. This will allow us to streamline our inspection protocols and reduce overhead. Beth slid a packet of papers across the table, avoiding eye contact. This contains your termination agreement, including 2 weeks of severance pay and information about COBRA benefits for continuing your health insurance, she explained mechanically. There is also a non-disclosure agreement that prohibits you from discussing company operations with competitors. My initial shock quickly gave way to a strange, calculating calmness. Rather than reacting emotionally, I found myself thinking with unusual clarity about the contractual implications of what was happening. I would like to review these documents carefully before signing, I said, keeping my voice steady. We need them completed today, Warren responded sharply. I understand, but I still need to read what I am signing, I insisted, noting Beth's subtle nod of approval. As I carefully read through each page, I paid particular attention to the sections regarding company certifications. As expected, the standard clause was there. All company-sponsored certifications, licenses, and credentials requiring employer validation will be updated to reflect separation of employment. Beth maintained an uncomfortable silence throughout the process, occasionally glancing at Warren with what appeared to be uncertainty. Her body language suggested she was not entirely comfortable with how this termination was being handled. After reading every word, I signed the documents where indicated. I had no real choice in the matter, but I wanted to ensure I understood exactly what was happening from a legal standpoint. Your company key card will be deactivated as of noon today, Warren stated. Security will escort you to your desk to collect personal belongings and then to the exit. Company policy for involuntary terminations, he added with what seemed like unnecessary satisfaction. A security guard named Frank, who I had greeted every morning for years now, stood awkwardly at the conference room door, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. As we walked to my desk, colleagues peered over cubicle walls and through office doors, quickly looking away when I noticed them watching. I methodically packed my personal items into a cardboard box provided by Human Resources, family photos, my aviation textbooks. The model airplane Jeffrey had given me after our first major airline contract, a spare sweater I kept for cold days. 8 years reduced to a single box. As I closed my desk drawer for the final time, Rachel hurried past, discreetly slipping a folded note into my pocket while pretending to help me with my box. "Call me," she whispered almost imperceptibly. The walk through the facility to the exit felt interminable. Employees I had worked with for years suddenly became intensely interested in their computer screens as I passed. The security guard, to his credit, tried to maintain a respectful distance while still fulfilling his duty. At the main entrance, Beth appeared one last time to collect my keycard and company ID badge. "I am sorry it ended this way, Amanda," she said quietly, the first hint of genuine human emotion I had encountered during the entire process. The drive home passed in a blur. I remember stopping at a red light and suddenly realizing I had no recollection of the previous 3 miles. My mind was simultaneously racing and numb, trying to process the abrupt end to a career I had poured my heart and soul into for nearly a decade. Once inside my house, with the door firmly closed behind me, the emotional dam finally broke. I sank to the floor as bolt and rivet anxiously circled me, whining softly at my distress. The tears came in, waves interrupted occasionally by surges of anger and disbelief. How could my expertise be considered redundant? How could Douglas possibly handle the certification requirements without the proper credentials? Around 11 that night, my phone rang. It was Rachel. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "Not really," I admitted. "What is happening there?" "Warren took everyone to lunch to celebrate the successful restructuring." Her voice dripped with disgust. "He is acting like he just pulled off some brilliant business maneuver. Douglas is already moving into your office." After speaking with Rachel, I pulled out my employment contract and reviewed it again, paying special attention to the certification clauses. The company had sponsored my composite material inspection and repair certification renewal just 6 months earlier at a cost of nearly $20,000. According to the contract language, this certification would be automatically flagged as invalid with the FAA upon termination of my employment. What Warren failed to understand was that this particular certification was not just a personal credential that allowed me to perform certain tasks. It was integrated into the company's master operating license with the FAA, which permitted Aerodynamics to service next-generation aircraft with composite components. My name was literally on the operating documentation that allowed the company to legally function in its primary market segment. As this realization crystallized, a strange sense of calm replaced my distress. I had not asked for this situation, but Warren's reckless decision-making had created a problem that would soon become apparent to everyone at Aerodynamics, right up to the board of directors. For 3 days, I barely left my house. The emotional toll of being suddenly terminated from a job I had dedicated my life to left me alternating between numbness and bouts of intense anger. My dogs provided silent comfort, never leaving my side as I processed what had happened. I ignored calls from well-meaning friends needing time to sort through my thoughts. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Ordinarily, I might have ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Is this Amanda Carter?" a male voice inquired. "Yes, who is calling?" "This is Thomas Weber from Pacific Airlines Maintenance Division. We have an A350 scheduled for composite inspection next week at Aerodynamics, but the FAA system is showing their certification status as pending review. Do you know what is going on? Our operations team is getting nervous." I took a deep breath before responding. "I no longer work for Aerodynamics, Mr. Weber. I was terminated 4 days ago." A long silence followed. "But you are the primary certification holder for their composite repair authorization," he finally said, confusion evident in his voice. "That is correct," I confirmed, the implications hanging in the air unspoken. "I see," he replied slowly. "Thank you for your honesty. We will need to make some calls." This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 days, I received similar calls from 3 other airlines and 2 independent maintenance directors, all encountering the same issue. The FAA's automated system had flagged Aerodynamics' operating certification for review the moment my employment termination was processed through the system. Rachel called that evening, her voice a hushed whisper. Amanda, something weird is happening. All the composite inspection work has been put on hold. Warren is running around like a madman and nobody can get straight answers about why we cannot proceed with scheduled maintenance. Has anyone checked the FAA certification portal? I asked already, knowing the answer. Douglas tried, but apparently there is some issue with the access credentials, Rachel explained. Warren keeps saying it is just a paperwork glitch that will be resolved quickly. According to Rachel, Douglas was frantically trying to figure out how to replicate my certification credentials, not understanding that the composite material inspection and repair certification required years of documented experience, specialized training, and formal FAA testing. It was not something one could simply apply for or transfer. By the end of the week, the situation had escalated dramatically. Rachel reported that Delta Airways had put all their contracts with Aerodynamics on hold, pending resolution of the certification issue. This represented nearly 30% of the company's monthly revenue. The finance department is in panic mode, Rachel confided. Warren told everyone not to worry, but then Maggie from accounting overheard him on the phone trying to secure an emergency loan to cover operating costs if the Delta contracts remained suspended. I decided it was time to consult with my friend Stephanie Liu, an attorney specializing in aviation regulations. We met for coffee, and I explained the entire situation from Warren's arrival to my termination and the subsequent certification issues. After reviewing my contract and the relevant FAA regulations, Stephanie sat back with a bemused expression. Amanda, Warren created a serious problem for Aerodynamics when he terminated you. The company's master operating license for composite materials is indeed directly tied to your personal certification. Without you on staff, they legally cannot perform inspections or repairs on any aircraft with significant composite components, which includes most new generation planes. Can they fix this by just hiring someone else with the same certification? I asked. Not quickly, Stephanie explained. There are fewer than 50 people in the country with your level of certification. Even if they found someone immediately willing to join them, the FAA would need to process the paperwork to update the operating license, which typically takes 30 to 60 days. Meanwhile, they cannot legally service any composite aircraft. Later that afternoon, I received a call from an FAA representative named Craig Johnson, who was following up on the automatic notification triggered by my separation from Aerodynamics. Ms. Carter, our records indicate you were the primary certification holder for Aerodynamics' composite repair operations, he stated. We need to confirm your employment status for our files. I explained that I had been terminated for redundancy reasons. Craig sighed heavily. I see. Well, I should inform you that without a certified inspector, with your qualifications on staff, Aerodynamics is not currently authorized to perform inspections or repairs on composite structures. I will be issuing a formal notice to them today. Through Rachel's updates, I learned that the company's operations were grinding to a halt. Aircraft that had been in the middle of maintenance procedures now sat idle in hangars, unable to be completed or returned to service without proper certification. Airlines were becoming increasingly frustrated, and some were already making arrangements to move their aircraft to competitors' facilities, despite the logistical challenges and costs involved. The financial implications were mounting by the day. Each grounded aircraft represented thousands of dollars in lost revenue, and the company's reputation was taking a severe hit in the industry. Rumors were circulating about mismanagement and regulatory problems. 10 days after my termination, Rachel called with news that board members had begun asking pointed questions about the sudden operational crisis. Warren had apparently tried to downplay the severity of the situation, characterizing it as a temporary administrative hiccup, but the mounting financial losses told a different story. Jeffrey is cutting his vacation short, Rachel reported. He called into the emergency board meeting and nearly exploded when he heard what was happening. He will be back tomorrow. The next morning, I received a text message from Michael in maintenance. Boss is back. All hell breaking loose. Warren tried to blame certification issues on you leaving voluntarily. Jeffrey reviewing termination docs now. Stand by. 3 hours later, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Jeffrey Miles. After nearly 2 weeks of unemployment and emotional turmoil, I was about to speak with the CEO who had been absent when my career was derailed. Amanda Jeffrey's voice came through with a mixture of relief and stress when I answered. Thank God you picked up. We need to talk urgently. Hello, Jeffrey, I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the adrenaline suddenly coursing through my body. I understand there are some operational issues at Aerodynamics. Operational issues. The company is practically at a standstill, he said, exhaling heavily. I just spent 4 hours going through what happened in my absence. I had no idea Warren was planning to terminate you, much less the implications for our certification status. I remained silent, letting him continue. Can you explain to me exactly what is happening with our FAA certifications right now? He asked. When I was terminated, the automatic notification system informed the FAA that the primary certification holder for your composite material inspection and repair authorization was no longer employed by Aerodynamics. I explained calmly. As per regulations, this places your master operating license for all composite work under review. Without a certified inspector on staff, the company cannot legally perform or sign off on any composite inspections or repairs. Jeffrey's sharp intake of breath was audible, and this affects all our newest generation aircraft contracts. Correct. Any aircraft with significant composite components, which includes virtually all Boeing and Airbus models manufactured in the last decade. My God, he muttered. Amanda, I need you to meet with me and the board today. Can you come to my house at 2? I do not want this discussion to happen at the facility with Warren present until we figure this out. After consulting quickly with Stephanie, who agreed to accompany me as my attorney, I accepted the meeting. We spent the next 2 hours preparing our approach, reviewing my documentation, and discussing potential outcomes. Jeffrey's lakeside home was a modern architectural showcase I had visited once before for a company holiday party. Today, instead of festive decorations, the spacious living room had been converted into an impromptu meeting space. 4 board members sat around a large table along with Beth from Human Resources, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Jeffrey greeted me with genuine warmth, apologizing again for what had transpired in his absence. After introducing Stephanie as my legal counsel, we joined the others at the table. For those who have not met her, this is Amanda Carter, our former Senior Aviation Safety Inspector, Jeffrey began. And as I have just learned, the person whose certification our entire composite repair operation legally depends on. One of the board members, an older gentleman named Richard Blackwell, leaned forward. Miss Carter, we appreciate you coming today. We are trying to understand how we ended up in this precarious position. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Warren strode in, his face flushed with anger. You called a board meeting without me, he demanded, then froze momentarily when he saw me. What is she doing here? I invited her, Warren Jeffrey replied coldly. Sit down. We are discussing the company's certification crisis that resulted from your decision to terminate our only qualified composite inspector. Warren composed himself quickly. This is a temporary administrative issue that Douglas is resolving. Amanda was redundant personnel, and her resistance to our efficiency improvements was hindering progress. I remained calm, as Warren took a seat across from me, his eyes now avoiding mine. Warren Jeffrey said carefully, Did you review Amanda's contract and certification status before terminating her? Of course I did, Warren replied dismissively. Douglas is more than capable of handling those responsibilities. This was my moment. I opened my folder and slid copies of my certification documentation across the table. My composite material inspection and repair certification requires 5,000 hours of documented experience, specialized training, and formal FAA testing, I explained to the board. Douglas Hamilton has none of these qualifications. Additionally, Aerodynamics' master operating license specifically names me as the certified inspector permitting the company to work on composite components. Beth nodded in confirmation. The HR files corroborate this. Amanda's certification is explicitly referenced in our FAA operating authorization. Warren's face reddened. This is just bureaucratic red tape. We can apply for an updated certification with Douglas as the named inspector. Jeffrey turned to Beth. How long would that process take, assuming Douglas even qualifies? 30 to 60 days minimum, Beth replied. And from my review of his credentials, Douglas does not currently meet the basic requirements to apply. The implications hung heavily in the room. Aerodynamics could not legally operate in its primary market segment for at least 2 months, possibly longer. The financial impact is already severe, one board member noted. We have 12 aircraft grounded mid-maintenance with no legal way to complete the work. 3 airlines have already begun moving their planes to competitors. Warren's defensive posture suddenly shifted to attack. Amanda clearly sabotaged the company by not ensuring a backup certification holder was in place. This is her attempt to make herself irreplaceable. I had anticipated this accusation and was prepared. I recommended certification training for 2 additional inspectors last year. I countered, sliding the documented proposal across the table. The request was denied due to budget constraints. Jeffrey picked up the proposal, noting his own signature on the rejection form, and winced visibly. There is more you should know. I continued, maintaining my professional composure. During Warren's brief tenure, I documented numerous instances where safety protocols were compromised and inspection records were modified to show completions that had not occurred. I presented copies of the altered maintenance logs with Douglas's unauthorized sign-offs, along with my contemporaneous notes documenting safety concerns that had been dismissed. As the board members reviewed these documents, Warren's demeanor changed again. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former employee, he sputtered, but his confidence was clearly shaken. Jeffrey turned to him with ice in his voice. Warren, did you alter maintenance records? Of course not. Douglas was simply streamlining the documentation process. By signing off on incomplete inspections, I interjected. That violates federal regulations and compromises aircraft safety. The conversation continued for another hour, with Warren's explanations becoming increasingly convoluted and contradictory. When questioned about his relationship with Douglas, he reluctantly admitted they had worked together at his previous company, but insisted this had no bearing on his hiring decision. As the discussion progressed, another disturbing possibility emerged. Richard Blackwell, reviewing Warren's previous employment, noted that his last 3 positions had been with companies that were subsequently acquired at reduced valuations following operational difficulties. Richard asked directly, "Do you have any connection to Aerospace Consolidated Holdings?" Warren's visible flinch answered the question before he could compose himself. Aerospace Consolidated Holdings was a notorious industry investment group, known for acquiring struggling maintenance facilities at fire sale prices. They reached out to me after I started at Aerodynamics, but I never pursued discussions, Warren claimed unconvincingly. The board members exchanged knowing glances. The picture becoming clear, Warren had been deliberately undermining Aerodynamics' operational capacity, potentially to devalue the company for acquisition. After presenting all my documentation, I was asked to wait in another room while the board discussed the situation privately. Stephanie accompanied me, and we sat in Jeffrey's sunroom overlooking the lake. "You handled that perfectly," Stephanie commented. "Professional, factual, and unflappable." After 45 minutes, Jeffrey joined us. "The board has reached some decisions," he said. "Warren is being terminated effective immediately. His actions have brought the company to the brink of disaster." He took a deep breath before continuing. "Amanda, we would like to offer you reinstatement with a promotion to Director of Compliance and Safety, reporting directly to me. The position would include a 40% salary increase, a signing bonus to compensate for the disruption, and a seat on the executive leadership team." While the offer was generous, Stephanie and I had anticipated this and prepared our response. "I appreciate the offer, Jeffrey," I replied carefully. "However, my return would need to include structural changes to prevent a similar situation in the future." I presented my conditions: Warren's immediate removal from the company, implementation of a certification redundancy program, creation of a safety oversight committee, reporting directly to the board, a comprehensive audit of all documentation from Warren's tenure, and a new employment contract with specific protections against future termination without board approval. Jeffrey listened attentively, nodding at several points. "These are reasonable requests, especially given what has happened. I will take them back to the board, but I believe they will be accepted. We need you back, Amanda, and we need to fix the structural problems that allowed this to happen." The negotiation process continued for another hour, with various details being refined. By the end of the afternoon, we had reached an agreement that addressed all my concerns while providing a path forward for Aerodynamics to recover from this near-catastrophic situation. As Stephanie and I prepared to leave, Jeffrey walked us to the door. "I should have never gone on vacation," he said ruefully. "Everyone deserves time off, Jeffrey," I replied. The problem was not your absence, but the safeguards that were not in place. He nodded thoughtfully. A lesson learned at great cost. We will see you Monday morning. I will be there, I confirmed, feeling a complex mix of vindication and determination to help rebuild what had nearly been destroyed. My return to Aerodynamics the following Monday could not have been more different from my exit just 2 weeks earlier. Jeffrey walked me in personally, announcing to the assembled staff that I was returning as the new Director of Compliance and Safety. The relief on many faces was evident, particularly among the technical teams who understood the certification crisis the company had been facing. Warren was gone. According to Rachel, security had escorted him out Friday afternoon in much the same manner I had been removed. Douglas quietly resigned over the weekend, clearly recognizing his position was untenable once Warren's scheme had been exposed. My first priority was re-establishing our certification status with the FAA. Craig Johnson, my contact at the agency, expedited the paperwork once I was officially back on staff, allowing us to resume composite repair operations within 3 days. The grounded aircraft began moving again, and airlines cautiously returned their maintenance schedules to Aerodynamics. Rebuilding trust both internally and with our clients proved to be a more complex challenge. I scheduled meetings with each major airline representative, transparently explaining the situation and the steps we were taking to ensure it never happened again. We implemented a structural failure, not just a personnel one I acknowledged to Jane Bradley from Transcontinental Airways, who had witnessed Warren undermining me weeks earlier. We are completely overhauling our compliance protocols to prevent any single point of vulnerability. True to my conditions for returning, we immediately began training 3 additional inspectors for composite certification. While they would not achieve full qualification for at least a year, this redundancy would ensure the company never again found itself unable to legally operate due to a single personnel change. The Safety Oversight Committee was established with representation from the board, executive leadership, and technical staff. This committee would review all major safety decisions and have direct authority to escalate concerns without going through traditional management channels, eliminating the possibility of another Warren blocking critical safety. Information. Healing the emotional wounds among the staff took time. Many colleagues felt guilty for not speaking up during Warren's brief but destructive tenure. Others were traumatized by the fear and uncertainty of watching the company nearly collapse. I should have done more, Michael confessed during a private conversation in the maintenance hangar. I knew something was wrong with the inspection documentation Douglas was pushing through, but I was afraid of losing my job. Warren created a culture of fear deliberately, I assured him. That was part of his strategy to control information and isolate problems. To address this, we implemented new anonymous reporting channels and protection policies for employees who raised safety or ethical concerns. Jeffrey supported these changes wholeheartedly, having learned the hard way how quickly a toxic leader could undermine years of careful culture building. On a personal level, the experience transformed my approach to work-life balance. The sudden termination had forced me to confront how completely I had defined myself through my career. During those 2 weeks of unemployment, despite the stress and uncertainty, I had actually reconnected with parts of myself long neglected. I began setting boundaries, leaving the office by 6 most evenings and taking weekends off, except for genuine emergencies. I resumed hiking with my dogs, joined a local aviation book club, and even started dating again, meeting a kind flight instructor named Brian who understood the demands of the industry but also valued personal time. The emotional trauma of being discarded after years of dedication did not disappear overnight. I worked with a therapist to process the anger and betrayal, gradually finding ways to trust again, while maintaining healthy professional skepticism. The experience had taught me that expertise and dedication were not always enough protection in the corporate world. My relationships with colleagues evolved in unexpected ways. Rachel and Michael, who had stood by me during the crisis, became true friends rather than just work associates. We began socializing outside the office, something I had rarely done before, finding that our shared experience had created bonds that transcended professional connections. One of the most significant changes we implemented was a comprehensive knowledge-sharing protocol. I had unintentionally become a single point of failure by being the only one with certain critical certifications. Now we created detailed documentation, cross-training programs, and certification development paths to ensure critical knowledge was distributed throughout the organization. 6 months after my return, Jeffrey called me into his office. The company had not only recovered, but was thriving with record contract numbers and a renewed reputation for regulatory excellence. "You know what the board chairman said to me yesterday?" Jeffrey asked with a smile. "He said firing you was the best thing that ever happened to Aerodynamics." Seeing my startled expression, he quickly clarified, "Not because we wanted to lose you, but because it exposed a critical vulnerability before it became catastrophic." Imagine if this had happened during an actual safety incident rather than a personnel issue. His words captured the greatest lesson from the entire ordeal. Sometimes it takes a near disaster to reveal the weaknesses in a system. Had Warren succeeded in covering up the certification issue for longer, or had I chosen not to return, the company might have collapsed entirely or worse. Compromised aircraft safety in an attempt to continue operations. The experience taught me to recognize my true value in the workplace not just as a technical expert, but as someone whose integrity and commitment to safety standards transcended organizational politics. It reinforced the importance of documentation, understanding the legal implications of employment contracts, and self-advocacy when core principles are at stake. A year after the incident, Aerodynamics had emerged stronger with more robust safety systems, better employee protections, and a deeper appreciation for the regulatory frameworks that ultimately protect both the company and the flying public. What Warren had viewed as bureaucratic obstacles we now recognized as essential safeguards that defined our purpose and value. As I completed my final inspection of the day, signing off on a complex composite repair that would return a Boeing 787 safely to service, I reflected on how close we had come to losing everything and how adversity had ultimately forged a better path forward. Have you ever experienced a situation where your unique skills or knowledge suddenly became critically important after being undervalued? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Also, if you found this story helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more workplace insights and experiences. Share this video with someone who might be struggling to recognize their own value in a professional setting. Remember, sometimes what seems like a devastating setback can reveal your true worth in ways you never anticipated. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the confidence to stand firm in your expertise when it matters most.